Okay guys, today I want to show you how to install or set up a virtual network inside VirtualBox. So there are many reasons you might want to do this. Say you want to segregate some virtual machines from others, or you want to try out a router software and be able to install different types of routers, firewalls, things like that. So I'm going to show you today how to set up a virtual network and how to go about installing pfSense. I'm not going to go just really in depth into pfSense. I'll do that in a later video. But today I really just want to show you how to go through and set up the virtual network. So VirtualBox has its own network. It's always NAT. So whenever you guys, whenever you build a virtual machine and it gets an automatic IP address from VirtualBox, it's always going to be 10.0.2 something. I want to change this and created the new NAT network. And NAT just means that it's going to be network address translation from inside the VirtualBox environment out to your host machine's network. I'm just going to say router WANs. That way, if we want to build multiple routers, we can, and just have them all on the same NAT network. So 10.1.0. Let's make this a /26. Gives us 62 usable addresses. So supports DHCP, makes it easier whenever you're installing. If your router or firewall gets an IP address automatically, you don't have to do that. You can also do port forwarding. So if you wanted to add some forwarding to those ports, say for remote desktop or SSH or whatever you could, it's just an easy way to do it. So you see renamed from that network, right? Hit OK. So now we've got a few virtual machines. I have 3 on here now. I'm going to create a new one. So I'm going to say pfSense. This is BSD 64-bit. Gig of RAM is plenty for pfSense. It doesn't need just a whole lot in this environment. If we were doing Suricata or Snort or something like that, then we would need to add more than a gig of RAM, but for what we're doing, 1 gig is enough. So I'm going to leave a VirtualBox disk image dynamically allocated so that the disk size can grow as it needs to. I'm going to start off at 16 gigs. Installed, it'll probably be more around 2 or 3 gigs. Don't want to be just a whole lot. So we need to make sure that our network is set up correctly. So I'm going to go in first off and take out the floppy. I'm going to drop that down. So this is your boot order from top to bottom. So optical boots first, then hard drive, then floppy, then network. So like I said, gig of RAM is fine. 1 CPU is fine for what we're doing. You may want to change that. 1 processor. Really don't need a lot of graphics, any graphics that much really. So I'm going to go to IDE controller. It's, I don't know, it's virtualized. I would rather see it run across SATA. It really doesn't matter. They use IDE to be backwards compatible with older operating systems, like BSD's, older versions of BSD. So I'm going to choose a virtual disk file, and we will use the, this isn't the latest version, but it's very close to the latest, 2.4.5. Audio we do not need. Network we need network, right? So I'm going to go to NAT, and then we are going to, I'm going to add 1 NAT network. Name router WANs. This is the one we created. I like the Intel Pro 1000. Never have problems with drivers or anything. Promiscuous mode deny. So if you're trying to sniff packets, then you want to turn this to allow all, and it'll allow the NIC to be able to pick up every packet, whether it's intended for it or not. All right, so here's your MAC address. We want to keep an eye on that. The reason I say that is whenever you're installing, everything is in command line for the initial install. So whenever you're trying to figure out which one of these adapters, because we're going to add another adapter, which one of these adapters is which, you want to be able to keep an eye on the MAC address. That way you can tell, well, this is the WAN interface because it is attached to my router WANs, right? So these just cycle through. You can change these as you need to. Cable connected. All right, so we need to add another adapter. Our other adapter is going to be for our internal network for the virtual machines to use. I don't have one. I'm going to say router LANs. So if I have more than one router, I'm going to want to create another network for this, because you don't want to have multiple routers running, firewalls running, handing out DHCP or whatever on the same internal network. So this one's going to be router LANs. Promiscuous mode deny, and there's our MAC address for that. Hit OK. So I don't want to start that up yet. I'm going to go ahead and move my Windows 10 over to that network, so it can be right now it's on a bridged adapter. See that? It's bridging out to the host network. Of course, virtual machines are guests, and this machine would be the host, right? So I'm going to change this over to internal network, and it will be router LANs network, the one I just created. So now this machine, this Windows 10 machine, will be a client of the pfSense once I get the pfSense installed. So this is the start of our virtual network. All right, okay. So go ahead and fire up pfSense, get it installed. It takes no time at all, really. So pfSense CE 2.4.5. It's Community Edition. And of course, if you have the resources, I mean several gigs of RAM, you can run several virtual machines. We do this in the class a lot. Several virtual machines and have all of those VMs running with servers and clients and all of that running through one virtual router, and all of that taking place on one machine. So except install pfSense. This is one of the simplest, fastest installations I've ever seen. There may be one that's easier, but I've never seen it. We run pfSense a lot here. It is a really, really good firewall and router. Huge amount of configurations. And of course it's free and open source. So it's done. The installation is finished. Before exiting the installer, we'd like to open a shell in the new system to make any final manual modifications. Now I want to reboot. So reboot now. And we'll go through and make sure that we get an IP address from our new router WAN we created, and then we'll be able to boot up our Windows 10 machine and finish setting up pfSense. It'll take just a few seconds. And of course, one of the kind of cool features you can do with VirtualBox is headless mode. So if I wanted to start this up, I can just right click and start headless. Of course, it's running now, so I can't do that. All right, so capture. It rebooted from the disk. Give me a second, we'll fix this. So I'll just hit close, and then we'll power off the machine. So all we have to do is change our boot order. This kind of stuff happens sometimes. Okay, so we're gonna drop the optical disk down. That way the hard drive or hard disk is first in the boot order. It's been doing really good about taking this out of the boot order whenever it finishes, but for some reason it didn't this time. Not a big deal. So we've already installed. We'll just boot it back up, and this time boot from hard disk. So Let's take a minute or so. There is a new version out, pfSense 2.4.5-P1. We've been using this, I don't know, since 2013, 2014. I like pfSense a lot. All right, so here's our new network. It's a DHCP IPv4 on EM0. It's already set up. So we have the default 192.168 comes up with pfSense. Shows VirtualBox, virtual machine, NetGate device ID. So boot up's complete. Everything's ready to go. I mean, we could assign the interface, the interface IP addresses, all that kind of stuff here. But for now, I want to go ahead and log in. Then we'll go through and finish the installation. So I'm going to start on Windows 10 machine. If you remember, I moved it over to the router LANs. You can see that here. So start that up. And I went into full screen mode. Hope you guys can still see me. Alright, so we should be online and have an IP address. Alright, so go back to status and see it. Properties. I'll change that to private. Change it to private anyway. So here's our IP address. First one in the range, 100. DNS servers 1.1, and this is the pfSense router we just installed. So all that's normal. I need to install another browser on here. Not a big fan of Edge, even the new one. So 192.168. Another reason I'm not a big fan of Edge. Alright, so details. It's a self-signed certificate, so it's not a big deal. So username's admin, password's pfSense. Then we'll go through the whole process. Don't want to say the password. So hostname pfSense. If you have a domain, set it here. If you want primary DNS server, you just use Quad 9, and I'll just use Google for the other one. Allow DNS servers to be overridden by DHCP on the WAN. If you don't like your DNS server that's on your host machine, you can uncheck that. But like I say, it's a virtual network. It really doesn't matter. Really just doing this usually for testing. Now, one thing we want to do here is we want to uncheck this box. So we're in configure WAN interface. And the reason being is because the WAN interface is in a private network. So we want to make sure we don't block anything from the private on this instance. Right? If you were putting this on a perimeter machine, you would want to, of course, you don't block anything that was private coming in. We can leave the LAN IP address 192.168. It doesn't really matter. We can go down and get really fancy with a bunch of IP addresses and subnet masks. Create a whole bunch of subnet masks, or sorry, a whole bunch of IPs, or just a very short amount of IPs, a bunch of networks. We don't really need to. We'll just leave this standard for now. I just don't like typing in 192.168. It's usually 192.10s. It's lazy IT guy. Admin password. Make this something I can remember. And reload. So now we are up to date. Everything is installed. Except the license. These guys, they do a really good job with this. You can take the survey. I'm taking it actually a few days ago, so I'm not gonna do it again. So NetGate services and support, all the different things they do. And of course the BIOS is all virtual, so nothing new there. Missing or expired CSRF token. I think this may be a browser problem. I've had this issue before. Either that or it just kicked me out because I haven't logged back out of the interface yet. Alright, so that's that, guys. We have status DHCP leases. And there we are. Shows our MAC address. When we started, when it ends. What else you want to see? Status. There are a ton of different things we can do in here. I really don't want to get into pfSense right now. Really just showing you how to set up a virtual network. Let me see. So there's our IP address, subnet mask. We can do tracert, google.com. You guys see our pfSense, a local domain, and then there is our 10.1 address that we created for the router WAN. So you see that we're moving through our virtual router that we created, and then from our virtual router to our virtual network, and then from our virtual network to our host network, and then out to the internet. So it just shows you all the hops in between. So I'm gonna leave this up. I'll work on this another day. The firewall it is. I'm shutting the Windows 10 machine down. So alright, that's all, guys. That's how you create a virtual network inside VirtualBox.